All right, ready to dive into some seriously real talk about startups.
Let's do it.
Today, we're going deep with Ben Horowitz and his book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
One of my favorites.
We've handpicked the most insightful parts for you, focusing on what it takes to lead, especially when you're in the thick of that crazy startup roller coaster.
No sugarcoating here.
None whatsoever. We're ditching the usual success stories and getting into the nitty-gritty, those tough decisions, the stuff they definitely don't teach you in business school.
The real deal.
Yeah.
And Ben Horowitz, he's the perfect guide for this.
Absolutely.
He's not just been some advisor on the sidelines.
Right.
He's built companies, led teams through those trenches.
Netscape, Opsware.
Exactly. He's got the scars, the wisdom, the whole 9 yards.
He's been there.
We'll be unpacking those experiences, the wins, the wipeouts, all of it, pulling out those hard-won lessons so you can walk away with some seriously actionable insights.
I love that. So speaking of hard-won lessons, there's this story about a young Ben Horowitz facing down a bully just to score a ride in a red wagon.
Ah, yes. The ask for the wagon story. It's such a great anecdote because it really reveals this key insight about Horowitz's leadership, something we see throughout his career, this boldness, but paired with careful calculation. He's not afraid to go against the grain, to take risks, but he's always thinking a few steps ahead.
It's not just playground guts, though. I mean, I think most 5-year-olds would freeze up in that situation, but he goes for it, asks for the wagon, ends up making a lifelong friend.
Right.
It speaks to this idea that sometimes the biggest wins come from just having the audacity to ask.
Absolutely. It's that what's the worst that can happen? Mentality, but applied to these high-stakes situations. But here's the thing. It's not about being reckless. It's about understanding when it's time to defy conventional wisdom, even if it feels uncomfortable.
And that calculated risk-taking, it seems like a common thread throughout his leadership style. And we see it again with his football coach's "turn your shit in" speech. On the surface, it's funny, it's memorable, but there's a deeper leadership lesson there.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just some quirky coach. That speech, as unorthodox as it might seem, it brilliantly illustrates how effective leadership can be when it's stripped down to its core.
Yeah.
Clear expectations, direct consequences, and a little touch of humor to make it stick.
It's like the anti-corporate memo.
Right.
You just know that everyone on that field got the message loud and clear.
Exactly. It's about cutting through the noise and getting straight to the point.
Yeah.
But notice, he doesn't just tell people what to do, he makes it memorable. That's something I think a lot of leaders miss, the power of making your message emotionally resonate.
And that directness, that clarity, it seems like those lessons really stuck with Horowitz, especially when he talks about his experience at that company where the founders weren't really in control.
Right. His time at NetLabs, that was a defining moment for him because it really highlighted this truth that I think a lot of people shy away from. For a startup to truly thrive, the founders need to be the driving force, not just figureheads, but like active leaders.
Yeah.
Steering the ship.
I love how he compares it to like a bad blind date
Right.
where the other person just doesn't show up
Doesn't show.
and you're left feeling like, were they ever really serious in the first place?
Exactly. And that feeling of being let down, that's not how you want your employees or investors to feel about your company. Horowitz makes a really strong argument for founder-led companies. And it makes sense. That passion, that deep understanding of the vision, you can't fake it.
Yeah. It has to come from the top.
It's got to be genuine.
But being a passionate founder, it's not enough, is it?
It's just the start.
I mean, even with the best intentions, things can go sideways.
Oh, 100%.
And that leads us to Netscape.
Right.
Talk about a masterclass in resilience, battling Microsoft, essentially building the internet as they went along.
Building the plane while they were flying it.
Exactly. That's the kind of pressure cooker that I think really exposes the true nature of a leader.
Oh, absolutely. You see what they're made of when the heat is on.
And what's amazing is that despite all of that, they still managed to make some really significant contributions to how we experience the internet even today.
Oh, huge. JavaScript, SSL, cookies. These weren't just buzzwords back then. These were innovations born out of necessity.
Necessity.
A testament to their ability to adapt under relentless pressure.
And speaking of adapting, their head of marketing, Mike Homer,
Yes.
Horowitz calls him the ultimate warrior for just his unwavering presence, even when things were really tough.
Right. And I think what's fascinating about the Mike Homer example is that it highlights a key aspect of Horowitz's own leadership style, this idea of learning through observation.
Oh, interesting.
So he didn't just learn from his own wins and losses. He was absorbing these valuable lessons by watching others, especially those on the front lines.
That's a great point. And he saw Homer diving headfirst into every challenge, taking every phone call, never shying away from the tough stuff. It seems like that lead by example mentality really left a mark on Horowitz.
Absolutely.
So,
Actions speak louder than words, right?
for sure. But even with all those innovations, even with that warrior spirit, Netscape eventually sells to AOL. It must have felt like a bittersweet
Oh,
victory.
for sure. It's fascinating to see how Horowitz reflects on that period, acknowledging the losses, but also emphasizing the lasting impact of their work.
Because in a way, they laid the groundwork for the internet as we know it today.
Absolutely. They were pioneers. And that experience, that deep understanding of both the exhilaration and the exhaustion of building something monumental, that's what fueled their next big adventure, Loud Cloud.
Oh, Loud Cloud. This is where things get really interesting. We're talking about the birth of cloud computing as we know it. A concept so ingrained in tech now, it's almost impossible to imagine a world without it. What I find so fascinating is how it all started. This simple observation that scaling software to handle millions of users, it was a nightmare.
A nightmare.
Yeah.
And instead of just complaining about it, which would have been easy to do, they decided to solve it. But it wasn't just about finding a technical solution. This is where Horowitz's vision really shines. He recognized that they were dealing with a symptom of a much bigger problem.
Which is classic Horowitz, right? Identifying a need in the market and then just fearlessly building the solution, even if it means coining a term like cloud along the way.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. That term is everywhere now.
It's ubiquitous. It's not just a technology, it's an entire industry.
Yeah.
But as with any startup, Loud Cloud's journey, it was far from smooth sailing. We're talking funding struggles, a roller coaster IPO, facing those near-death experiences, both for the company and for Horowitz himself.
And he does not shy away from the emotional toll, the physical toll that it took on him. We're talking weight loss, this constant fear, those moments where he literally felt like he was going to die.
Yeah.
It's a side of leadership that we rarely hear about.
The human side. And he puts it all out there. Raw, honest. It completely dismantles this myth that successful entrepreneurs, they're somehow immune to the immense pressure that they face. Leading a startup, it's brutal, and he doesn't sugarcoat it. And he talks about how important it is to build that strong support system, both personally and professionally, to navigate those really dark times.
He credits his co-founder, Mark Andreessen, with providing much-needed dark humor and perspective during those difficult days.
Oh, that's so crucial. Having someone to laugh with, to share the burden, it makes a world of difference.
It's like having a battle buddy in the trenches with you.
Exactly. And the role of mentors, it can't be overstated.
Huge.
People like Bill Campbell, they provided this invaluable guidance and support, acting as sounding boards during those make-or-break moments.
It's like having a guide in the wilderness, someone who can help you read the map when you're completely lost in the woods.
Absolutely. And in Horowitz's case, those mentors, they helped him cultivate a leadership trait that would become one of his defining characteristics. Radical transparency.
It's interesting how that idea of radical transparency, something we often hear praised in theory,
Right.
is so much harder to actually put into practice, especially when things aren't going so well.
Yeah, it takes guts
It
to
does.
be that upfront, that honest with your team, especially when the news is bad.
Especially then.
But what Horowitz realized was that, true leadership, it isn't about projecting this image of being unflappable, always confident.
Right.
It's about being real, being human.
And he doesn't just talk about it, he lived it. During the dot-com crash, gathers his whole company, basically says, "We might be screwed, guys."
Whoa.
That level of honesty when you're facing potential disaster, that's incredibly risky.
It is. Most leaders, they'd be tempted to sugarcoat things, try to protect morale, even if it means sacrificing trust in the long run.
Right.
But Horowitz understood that honesty, delivered with empathy, delivered with a plan, that can actually be way more unifying than false optimism.
It reminds me of that saying, like, the truth will set you free, but first it'll probably really piss you off.
Exactly. I think people can handle the truth. They might even crave it, especially when it's given with that authenticity. And that kind of transparency, being willing to be vulnerable alongside your team, that's how real trust is built. It's not about pretending you have all the answers. It's about facing the uncertainty together.
It's huge. And that resonates so much, especially when you think about that pressure cooker environment of a startup facing a crisis.
Oh, yeah.
Which leads us to another pivotal moment, and that's the decision to pivot from Loud Cloud to Opsware.
Big move.
He's looking at a shrinking market, Fierce competition, dwindling funds. It's that crossroads that I think every entrepreneur faces at some point. Do you stick with that original vision even if it seems to be failing? Or do you make a radical change?
Right. And for someone like Horowitz, someone who's known for being so decisive, this had to be agonizing. And he doesn't downplay that at all. You know, the sleepless nights, the self-doubt, the weight of knowing that so much is riding on this decision.
Hmm.
The future of the company, the livelihoods of his employees.
Everything.
It's in those moments that I think the true mettle of a leader, that's when it's tested.
Yeah.
Because you've got your gut instincts, you've got your own hopes for this vision that you had.
Right.
But you have to be willing to consider the counsel of people you trust.
Absolutely. And he had some heady hitters in his corner. Bill Campbell, Michael Ovitz, people who weren't afraid to give him the hard truth, even if it meant challenging his assumptions.
Yeah, they told him what he needed to hear, and he listened. That's crucial, you know?
And it's fascinating how he describes their advice, like very direct,
Yeah.
almost brutal, but grounded in experience, coming from a place of wanting to see him succeed.
Right, because they'd been there. They'd seen it all. And that's a testament to the relationships he'd built. It underscores something that Horowitz emphasizes throughout the book. Mentorship, it's not just about getting guidance when you need it. It's about having people you trust enough to tell you what you need to hear, not just what you want to hear.
Having that sounding board, that outside perspective to help you see the forest for the trees, especially when you're so deep in it.
100%. You can get tunnel vision so easily.
It's so easy to do.
And in Horowitz's case, that outside perspective, it was critical. That decision to pivot, as difficult as it was a game changer.
It was. They found a new market, they gained traction, and then ultimately sell to HP for, let's just say, a cool $1.65 billion.
Not too shabby.
Not too shabby at all. It's the kind of move that seems brilliant in hindsight, but it takes so much courage, so much conviction to actually execute on.
Absolutely. You got to be willing to bet on yourself, even when it feels scary. And more than that, I think it highlights Horowitz's ability to adapt. He learned from his experiences, made those tough calls, even if it meant letting go of something he had poured his heart into.
That's huge. That willingness to walk away from a losing hand, even when you have so much writing on it.
So much.
That's what separates, those who talk about being entrepreneurs from those who actually are.
You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
Exactly. And it's that hard-won wisdom, that experience building and leading through both triumphs and failures that laid the groundwork for his next venture, creating a venture capital firm unlike any other.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
Right. Andreessen Horowitz.
The dream team.
I love their origin story because they weren't content with just being another VC firm writing checks. They wanted to actually give back, be a force multiplier for founders, especially those technical founders who often get overlooked or even misunderstood.
Right. The ones who are building the future but maybe don't always fit the mold. And this wasn't just some passion project for them. It was strategic,
Yeah.
Horowitz, he'd been there. He knew those unique challenges that these founders were facing. Scaling rapidly, building strong teams while you're scaling, balancing that innovation with execution.
How much?
He got it. He lived it. And he wanted to use all of that to empower this whole new generation.
I love that. And it's like they took a page out of the playbook of those Hollywood talent agencies, building that network of experts, advisors, mentors, all designed to give their portfolio companies that extra edge.
Oh, totally. They understood that in the startup world, it's not enough to just have a great idea.
Yeah.
You need a team. You need that network, that support system to help you navigate all the obstacles and really capitalize on opportunities.
And that laser focus on support, on really truly understanding what founders need, that just disrupted the traditional VC model.
It was a game changer.
It's no wonder they've become, one of the most respected firms in the Valley. And honestly, I think beyond.
For sure, they walk the walk.
They do. Which brings us to one of the most powerful concepts from the book, the struggle.
It's such a powerful phrase because it's universal.
It is.
It's that feeling of constant pressure, right? That weight of knowing, okay, things could go either way. Those constant tests that any entrepreneur, any leader faces.
Absolutely. And I think what's so valuable about Horowitz's perspective here is that he doesn't shy away from how dark it can get.
Oh, he goes there.
He talks about the loneliness, the self-doubt, that feeling of just being trapped in this never-ending cycle of crises. He normalizes those feelings.
He does.
And I think that's incredibly powerful.
Because it's real. It's the opposite of that good vibes only approach to leadership, right?
Yeah.
Saying, no, this is the reality. The hard things, they are hard.
They are.
But it's in those moments, in those pressure cookers, that we really discover what we're capable of.
I love that. It's not about pretending the struggle doesn't exist. It's about looking it dead in the eye, confronting it head on, and even more importantly, learning how to navigate it without letting it crush you.
Right. Learning those coping mechanisms, those strategies, because you can't just muscle through it all the time. You'll burn out. And that's where his advice goes beyond just inspiration, I think, and it gets really, really tactical. He gives very specific guidance on things like, building trust, but through honesty, through being radically honest, investing in your team the right way, and managing your own psychology so that you're not just constantly swept away by the chaos.
That idea of managing your psychology, I think, is crucial because so much of leadership really is an inside game, isn't it? It's about having that self-awareness to recognize when you are in over your head, the humility to ask for help, and then the resilience to just keep going, even when you really want to tap out.
No, 100%. And I think the thing that Horowitz emphasizes is that those skills, that mental toughness, it's not just for CEOs, it's for anyone who wants to make a real impact. It's about being able to handle pressure, make tough decisions, and bounce back when things get tough. It's something we can all work on.
One of the things that really clicked for me was how Horowitz talks about those different leadership styles, for different situations. He calls it peacetime versus wartime leadership.
Oh, that's such a great way to think about it, right?
Yeah.
It's like the context matters.
It does.
Yeah.
Because you can't lead the same way in every situation.
Exactly. During peacetime, when things are, relatively calm, you're focused on building, you're innovating, you're thinking about that long-term vision.
You're building the ship while you're sailing it, but the waters are fairly calm.
Right. You're making steady progress.
Yeah.
But then, boom, something shifts.
Always. There's always something.
It could be that dreaded pivot, a new competitor comes out of nowhere, suddenly the market's doing something totally unexpected.
It's like the rug gets pulled out from under you.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're in wartime.
Red alert.
Exactly. And that's when you need a different kind of leadership. You need to be able to make fast decisions. Even when you don't have all the information, you have to rally the troops. And honestly, survival mode kicks in.
It's all about survival. It's fascinating how he lays out those contrasting styles. It's like, he's a general who's been on the battlefield and he's sharing those hard-won strategies.
Right. And it's not theoretical. It's like, this is what got me through.
Exactly. And what I think is really insightful is that he doesn't say one style is better than the other.
Right.
It's about recognizing which context you're in and adapting your approach.
100%. Reading the room, reading the situation, it's key.
But that's easier said than done, right?
Totally.
Because in the moment, how do you know when is it actually time to make that shift?
He does give some really concrete signs to look out for in the book. But honestly, I think it comes down to self-awareness. Being honest with yourself about the situation, even when it's uncomfortable, and having that humility to adjust your style if you need to.
It's about recognizing that, what got you here might not be what gets you there.
100%. And sometimes the best leaders are the ones who can move between those two modes. Peacetime, wartime. Adapting is needed.
Because the battlefield changes constantly.
Constantly. And he doesn't shy away from talking about those internal battles that leaders face too. We're talking self-doubt, that feeling of being alone at the top, the pressure to perform day after day after day.
The pressure is immense.
It's real, but he normalizes it. He's like, look, this is part of the deal. It doesn't mean you're not cut out for this.
It's that honesty, that vulnerability that I think really makes his advice resonate.
Oh, absolutely. He's not up there on a pedestal. He's down in the trenches with you, sharing his own struggles, his doubts, his failures even.
Because, as he points out, failure is going to happen. It's inevitable. It's how you respond that defines you as a leader.
It's not about avoiding failure. It's about what you do when you're staring it in the face.
Exactly. And one of the things that he really emphasizes is having that strong support system in place. Mentors, friends, family, people that you can talk to, that you can be real with, people who get it, who can offer a different perspective, who can give you that little bit of encouragement when you need it most.
It makes all the difference having those people in your corner.
It really does. It's like having that safe space where you can just be vulnerable, take that armor off for a minute.
Because you can't be on all the time, right?
Yeah.
You need to recharge. And he talks about building in those routines and those practices that help you stay centered, help you stay focused, even when it feels like everything's chaotic.
right? Like having a consistent morning routine or, making sure that you're getting exercise or whatever helps you clear your head.
Exactly, whatever fills your cup,
Yeah.
because you can't pour from an empty cup.
It's so true.
It's about prioritizing your well-being, recognizing that, taking care of yourself. That's not selfish. It's actually strategic.
Because if you are burnt out, if you're exhausted, you're not going to be any good to anyone, especially not your team, your company.
Right. And he gets really specific, too. He shares strategies for managing your time, your energy, your emotions. Things like setting those boundaries, figuring out how to delegate effectively, and taking breaks when you need them.
Permission to rest.
Yes, you're allowed to rest. You're allowed to not be on 24/7. It's okay.
It's such a good reminder because, especially in the startup world, there's this glorification of the always on, never sleep entrepreneur, which is not sustainable.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's counterproductive in the long run.
It is. He also talks about finding that meaning, finding that purpose in the work that you're doing.
Oh, that's huge.
It's not just a job, it's got to be something you connect with.
It's got to be a mission.
Yes.
Because when you are truly passionate about what you're doing, it's so much easier to weather those storms, to push through when things get tough.
Absolutely. It's like having that internal compass, it keeps you going in the right direction even when you feel lost. He talks about, when those moments of doubt creep in, remind yourself why you started, what impact you're trying to make, what kind of legacy you want to leave behind.
It's about tapping into that deeper why. That's what fuels your motivation. That's what sustains you.
It's been amazing unpacking all of these insights from Ben Horowitz's book with you today.
I loved it.
It really does feel like we've just gotten this masterclass in leadership, and not just from some ivory tower. Like, this is from the trenches.
Yeah,
These are lessons learned from building some of the most impactful companies in recent history.
absolutely. And what I appreciate so much is that it's not just for CEOs or, aspiring entrepreneurs.
Right.
These are timeless principles. Leadership, resilience, self-awareness. It doesn't matter what you do. Those are valuable, always.
If you want to make an impact, it starts there.
100%.
Yeah.
And whether you're leading a team right now, maybe you're building a company, or honestly, even if you're just navigating your own life, Horowitz's insights, they give you this really powerful framework
They do.
for how to deal with those curveballs life throws at you, how to handle uncertainty, and then, ultimately how to come out on top.
Because that's what it's all about. He reminds us that the hard things are hard for a reason.
They are.
But it's in those really difficult moments, those crucibles, that's where we discover what we're truly capable of.
Where the growth happens.
Exactly.
Right.
So as you move forward on whatever path you're on, whatever challenges you're facing, remember his words. Embrace the struggle.
Embrace it.
Because it's in those moments of adversity that we build that resilience. That's where we discover our strengths and ultimately, maybe even achieve some things we never thought possible.
Couldn't have said it better myself.